Welcome everybody to the Obstacle Races New Zealand podcast. This week we interview Hayden Wells.
Hayden's done a few Spartan races, went to London for the 2019, I think, or 18 World OCR Championships. So it was a very interesting chat.
Yeah, we recorded this one a few weeks back, didn't we? And
yep.
I just saved it till now. I can't recall what we talked about, but yeah, talked a lot about Spartan and racing and other races he's done outside of OCR, and talked about the Obstacle Sports Association as well.
Of which he is the president.
Yes.
Very passionate about that as well.
Yeah, good to hear his thoughts on that. I do remember he talked about Rescue Run, that race.
Okay. Yep.
He was asking what happened to that. And then since we recorded this and releasing it in the time in between, Rescue Run put out a image on their Facebook with 2022 on there. So Hayden was asking whatever happened to them, and now we know they potentially coming back next year. So that's exciting.
Yes, it will be. Sounded like a good race. It sounded very well organised and had some good participants and for a good cause, raising money for the emergency services. So what else is new since we last spoke? I've been out to Barry Curtis Park and had a walk around it. And I did 4.3 kilometres pretty much around the outside of it. It is going to be interesting to see where and what happens. There is a lot of potential water obstacles there, but a lot of them have got do not swim signs and keep away from the ducks. So I'm not sure they will be allowed to use too many of it, but will be interesting to see what happens. And there is a lot of land at the western end. It's all been reclaimed. It's very muddy and mushy, but they are in the process of building some rugby fields and other playing fields there. So it will be interesting.
Okay. Yeah, it's good to see it firsthand. People listened to last episode, we discussed the new venue for Spartan, Barry Curtis Park. Spartan shifted from Ellerslie Racecourse to Barry Curtis. But last episode we talked about it a little bit, but we weren't so sure about how large the venue was. So we said we'd go away, do our research, come back, talk about it this time, actually know what we're talking about this time. You've gone out to view the site, and I'm based in Wellington, so I couldn't go, but I've done some researching online. So this time we have a lot more to talk about. And
it will be interesting to see, one, where they put the stop-start or start-finish line, the entertainment area, village, whatever they call it. Because what we did notice is parking will be at a premium. There is some regional car parks around, but being a public venue, I don't suppose they can take them over completely. So it will be interesting to see what they do with that.
Yeah, I was looking at the satellite view on Google Maps, and it looks like that is an issue. It looks like there were two or three car parks built into the park, but they're small.
Yep.
If you're talking a big Spartan, you're not going to fit cars in there. So I wonder if there's going to be an issue with people parking in nearby shops or the residential streets, or if Spartan can somehow open up like a sports field and turn that into parking. That mission would destroy the grass.
Yeah, I was just going to say that will be a problem, because like I walked onto those fields and everything, and I know we're at the end of winter, but Jesus, they were very muddy, and that would chop them up something chronic with people driving cars across them.
Yeah.
But I suppose it is in May, so they've just gone through summer, so they can hope it's dry. It'll be interesting to see. Otherwise, there's going to be a lot of disgruntled locals if they think they can just park in the streets all around.
Yeah, because looking at the venue, it's quite so the park's sort of like warps around the shopping centre, right? There's supermarkets and takeaways and I don't know, I presume cafes and bars, and so it's quite accessible to the shops, and it's accessible to Auckland City and the airport, and It's a really accessible venue, it looked like, just on Google. But car parking looked like the potential problem.
Car parking will be, and the shops potentially will be. There's some on Chapel Road, which are quite easy to get to, but the big shopping complex where Pack and Save and New World and all those were a bit further away, that's all behind a fence, so you can't actually get to it from the park. You'd have to go out onto the road and walk up the road and come into it. It's all fenced off, so
yeah. It's not it's still nearby to use, but not walkable distance.
Yeah, it will certainly be interesting to see. The parking, I think, will be the big issue.
Yes,
but there's certainly plenty of room there, and there is some big open spaces, so there'll be plenty of room for a sprint and a super might be. I suppose I did 5Ks right around the outside, so just 2 laps would be a super, wouldn't it? So
yes, I saw your data, and you went for about a 5K walk around the park, so you can fit a 5K in there easily.
Yep.
And I did my research online about how big it is. So Barry Curtis Park's 94 hectares, and which doesn't mean much to me. So I was trying to visualize how big a hectare is. So I found the information online that a 400-meter running track. So the grass field inside of that is just over 1 hectare, 1.12 hectares. So if you had 90 running tracks, is how big this area is. And it's quite large. It's compared to. So I looked up Ellerslie. Ellerslie was 55 hectares. So it's a lot bigger than their previous venue. It says online that Barry Curtis Park is larger than the Auckland Domain. I looked up that's 75 hectares.
Okay.
In saying that though, you can't. Looks like Google Maps is not all runnable. Like you were saying, there's water features and there's car parks that use up some of those hectares. And
on my Strava, that is pretty much that's all walk. We were on a walkway. I was on a walkway, either concrete or gravel footpath for most of that. There was just a couple of sections where the name Barry Curtis Park is. I'm walking across the football parks there, where the straight lines and all that are. But the rest of it was all on walkways, either gravel or concrete. So.
Yeah, and that was about a 5K. So if you went off onto the grass, you could fit a 10K in there pretty easily, right?
Yes.
Fit super in there. Yeah.
Yep.
If they can use, there's the potential for the water crossings, but like you were saying, are they signposted and?
They're signposted and fenced and.
Fenced. Yeah.
So, whether they get a special dispensation just to use a certain section of it, I don't know.
Yeah, because researching online, it describes it as having protected natural streams and gullies on site. The word protected being a potential problem, because that's a benefit this venue over Ellerslie is there's potential for water obstacles here.
Yeah.
But whether they can actually use them or not is another story.
And according to Strava, I did what? How much elevation did I do? About 12 metres. 44 metres.
Okay.
And probably most of that's going under the Orgnason Road underpass. It's a bit of a drop down into there. So
there's nothing too.
No, there's definitely no.
For a Spartan, we're not talking hills and mountains and trails. Yeah.
Oh well, I suppose it would just be good to get it back.
Be good to come back to Auckland. Yeah, it looks like largely a kind of flat. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. It's got mostly flat, open grass, paved path sort of running.
Yep.
No massive hills, no technical terrain.
No, none of that.
Okay. Yeah, so I think. What are your thoughts? Do you think it's better than Ellerslie as a venue?
Yes. Yep. Running around a race course wasn't that much fun. That little bit at the end where they had a bit bigger hill, which was probably quite good. There's certainly potential here. It'll be just interesting to see how much of the park they can use, because it is a public space. So there's going to be the public out there using it as well. So some of those pathways might be a little bit hard to use, but there's certainly plenty of room there. And the football field end, or the playing field end, I shouldn't say football field, playing field end, certainly has got the potential for, they could put a lot of obstacles in around a festival area there quite easily.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I think it looks better. It looks larger. Definitely fit the 10K super in, whereas they couldn't at Ellerslie, or not easily. yeah, there's potential for water obstacles here, water crossings. Don't know if they can use it, but there's potentially that feature there. But yeah, I think overall though, I think both aren't very good venues for showcasing. I've never done a Spartan overseas. You have.
Yeah, I'm looking up the one I did at the MCG. That was done in Yarra Park outside the MCG. Oh well, that's 35 hectares.
Okay. Yeah.
And that was well spread out. They had the main venue, the festival area right in the middle, and then we just did like loops, probably 4 or maybe 5 loops out from it. So you come back to the hoist, the spear throw, all the big ones were right around the festival area, and then the bucket carry and the walls were and the balance beam were all off down a bit of a what do you call it? So yeah, so if they got a sprint into 35 hectares of public park, and there were still people walking around it all the time we were running. So
okay,
there's certainly, and it wouldn't be Yarra Park would be a lot flatter than that was. So no, it'll be an interesting time. Hopefully we have out of all these green and red lights, and we actually know what we're doing by then.
Yes. Yeah, we'll see. So up in the air at the moment. Yeah, so hopefully Spartan comes back to New Zealand. It'll be awesome, be amazing. I think this venue is missing like a lot of the big mountains and stunning nature that you see from some of the overseas venues. I've never Spartan overseas, but some of them that you hear about the giant mountains and the technical trails and this sort of stuff that makes Spartan memorable. Yeah, but overall, like looks awesome, and I think the reason is that we nitpick Spartans' moves in New Zealand so much and are quite critical of it. But I think we do that because we love Spartan, want to see it return, and we analyse them more than we've analysed other races.
And especially when you see them kicking off in the east coast of Australia at the moment, it's a little bit frustrating not being able to compete. But oh well, hopefully we can get the rest of this year out of the way and start 2022 afresh.
Yeah.
I don't know. There's been no events to talk about that I know of, other than cancellations. What was the one you said that's just been cancelled? The Mud Run? Yeah,
Flemington Mud Run. I saw that. So they were going to go ahead in November in Hawke's Bay. It's like a school mud run, a fundraiser for the school, and yeah, they've cancelled unfortunately. So they said they'll come back in next year.
Oh well, you've got at least you still got the Alpha Challenge on your calendar and radar.
Yeah, so at this point that's still going ahead.
I had comms with Kim during the week, organising to send down some stuff from the NZOSA, and she said that they've got 250 people signed up, sealed that can make it, even if nothing changes. So it will be going ahead unless they get plummeted into level 3. So, because you can fly there now, can you?
Yes.
All right.
I'll be down. Yeah, I've been training for that. Well, I should be training for that. I've been exercising and training, not necessarily tailoring my training for Alpha Challenge, but yeah, over the next few weeks I'll be preparing. Looking forward to it.
All right, well, shall we cut out of this and cut over to Hayden and have a listen to what he's got to say on the whole world?
Yeah, let's go have a listen.
I think first thing though, excellent job bringing this podcast together. I think if it's if it helps bring the community of obstacle sports, and OCR is a big part of that. If it brings people together and creates those connections, that's awesome. It's awesome for the sport. It's awesome for New Zealand. So great work thus far on that, and all the best for the next series of interviews and things. But I guess a little bit background about myself. I originally, schooling wise, spent time in Taranaki. With the mighty Manga in Taranaki, one of the second largest hill in the North Island. and grew up there, I guess, schooling life. Before then, was my father was in the military, so spent a lot of time bouncing between military camps across New Zealand and Singapore before he kind of ended up back in Taranaki, which was my parents' hometown, and grew up there, quite active and involved in lots of different kind of sporting environments through secondary school and mountaineering and the Alpine Club that I was a part of. It was run by an ex-Vietnam vet at the time. That was some fascinating times up what was a reasonably challenging, I guess, backdrop of landscape being the Mount Taranaki, and was quite involved in lots of different sports, not really trying to land on anything in particular, but just really enjoy myself. Had my first bike ride when I was a decent event of a bike ride when I was, I think, 12. We did my father and I did a 25-kilometer charity ride together, and that was something that kind of etched in my mind, and I grew a bit of a passion for the bike, and had been, I guess, involved in a bit of running because of I played a lot of football and other, I guess, other sports, a bit of rugby, a bit of touch, and those sorts of things. And so, kind of just bounced around different areas of sport for a while until I sort of realised that cycling wasn't the game. It was the cycling community, whether it was just a group that I was with or not. I guess spent a lot of time talking about bikes and less about pedaling. And I realised that perhaps it wasn't the group for me, but still liked getting out on the bike and that. And was introduced to triathlon and duathlon. And I think what was really interesting with that was it was a sport and a community that was really encouraging. It was a collective of people that all had their weakness, whether it be swimming, biking, or running, and were fascinating to talk to during or after the event. Kind of not so much in that competitive way, but really, I guess, exploring the things that they were really, I guess, proud of as part of their race effort, the challenges that they were against in that race effort, and even the scenery or landscapes that we might be racing across. And I think that was a really defining moment for me, because it was a group that I really enjoyed, training with and competing with, and stuck with that for quite a while, while trying to continue to play rep football for Taranaki, which was not a great idea, trying to do two sports in a competitive way. But did reasonable at especially duathlon. I was under observation for the 93 world champs for age group triathlon I think it was about 17 at that stage, and unfortunately got pretty badly injured in a bike crash that sent that, I guess, the progress in that sport a little bit sideways. But got to watch, I guess, some of my friends in that progressed, and the guys that I raced with that got to go across to both the duathlon world champs and then subsequently the triathlon world championships and things, and kind of stayed in touch with that kind of community. And I think as the kind of years then ticked by, took time to just do a bit more of I guess those exploratory type sports and snowboarding and climbing. And just using, I guess, the opportunity of that physicalness to try travel and explore new parks. Spend a bit of time in America, climbing the Grand Canyon and Yosemite Park, and these kind of real wonderful areas that you need to be reasonably able-bodied to get yourself around. And fast forward that, was introduced to I guess the obstacle sport world, and that was a community which all of a sudden reminded me of triathlon and the reasons why I picked up on triathlon, where when you're you're competing with different people in the obstacle sports space. Everyone's got their weaknesses and their strengths and their fears as well, which is really interesting. And there's an interest in just trying to do better rather than to try and get one up on the person standing next to you. Just really being kind of exploring that from a physical, I guess you could say, athletic point of view, just seeing how far, I guess, what improvements you can make in my own progress in the sport, but then what encouragement and help, I guess, others that are my age that may otherwise want to sit on the couch can get them up in the weekend, and that's been an interesting journey as well. My working life is an interesting one. I've really been involved in the IT space for the last 20 years, and that's from a background of change management, and kind of it's where I studied at Massey, change and strategic management. And over the years, I guess a lot of the change has been centered around technology and what technology can bring to a business to improve it. And so I guess my working life has been highly centered on improvements and changing and those sorts of things as well. So I could say it's probably an underlying interest, both work and sport wise. Yeah.
Okay. Sounds real interesting. Sounds like you've been around a bit too.
A few places, yeah. I've been lucky enough to travel when travel was permitted, and both, I guess, exploring different places and cultures and things like that, which obviously really, really recommend the youth in New Zealand when they get that opportunity to really seize that, really defining moments, I think, in someone's life. Spent a good period of time around America, traveling in a van, the good old Kiwi way, with a couple of other Kiwi guys, all the southern states, and stopping off anywhere we could run or hike. And so I've already been quite fortunate about that. And I guess most recently, in recent years, the opportunity to do a few races and things overseas as well has fallen my way.
So what races have you done overseas?
The main recent races would be in 2019, and I guess from the OCR side of things, I kind of had a little bit of from a sporting point of view, I had a little bit of unfinished business with the loss of opportunity, I guess, for going to race in the duathlon national stage and or triathlon national stage. And so I kind of committed to myself that I'd give something a crack, and I was really enjoying the obstacle sports space. So I looked into Spartan and where that had become an emerging brand that wasn't in New Zealand until actually later on that year, and decided just to work towards racing in Sydney at the Australian Championship final to see if I could, I guess, have a goal at that and use that as a stepping stone to try and improve to a point where maybe I could go to regional or world competition for Spartan or the Adventure World Champs maybe in 2020. And I was lucky enough that the course over in Sydney was a reasonably steep and demanding course, which suited my, I guess, race style, and I managed to get away with a third for age group. And I was a bit of a surprise, but I was obviously pleased that the work had kind of paid off. And I kind of questioned with the qualification option to go to the Adventure World Champs whether I should leave it and keep preparing and angle for 2020, or throw it all in and just try and go, give it a crack. And very glad I did, because obviously 2020, the world shut down and those opportunities were taken away again. And I was really grateful to some friends that said, hey, look, you never know what's going to happen around the corner. You might get hit by a bus or get terribly injured, and so just take an opportunity when it comes. So I was really fortunate. It's a lot of supportive people around, to both, look after the family. My wife and I travelled across to London for that, and kind of take care of things on the home front while we both got away. I could go through that experience, which was fantastic, and also then have a bit of a break afterwards, which was also seemingly well overdue at that time. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I didn't realise you'd done. Was that the Spartan National Championships, the Australian in Sydney you were talking about?
It was the end of the national championship circuit. So
Okay.
it was the series end. So.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
Didn't realise you'd done that.
Mm.
Yeah. So what about OCR goals? I guess your athletic goals as well, and where would you like to see OCR go in New Zealand?
Yeah, look, it's the athletic goals is interesting. That's I've got an interest to continue some age group competitions, and really just, I guess, on the personal front of trying to expose those kind of weaknesses, and as a project trying to work on those to just as a self-improvement opportunity, but also to try and introduce others into the sport as well. And there's a lot of friends that over the years have slowly been introduced and have done well, and have really enjoyed it, and have mentioned how much better headspace and those sorts of things they have been in as well from the experience. And a few people, I guess, commented too on the trip that I did over to the UK in that same sort of vein. So that's really kind of motivated me to really look at where I could help or contribute with OCR in New Zealand, and there is of course the adventure racing interest that I have as well, and Ninja is also of interest with that short, sharp, athletic movements. So it'll be great to kind of to build on the community that's there, or I guess better connect the community that's there, because there is definitely pockets of people that are really passionate about these sports. And as we bring and connect them together, I think it's a real opportunity to develop a better presence in New Zealand. And I think there's some real untapped potential, athletic potential in New Zealand. We have quite dominant team sports and what is high contact, high athletic domains. You've got it's great watching the UK Kiwi netball teams recently, and of course the All Blacks is a significant brand across the world, and there's certainly a collection of youth, I think, that are perhaps not completely engaged with maybe those team sports. They're trying to find where they best fit, and I think obstacle sports, even if it's not where they end up, could definitely be part of that journey, is to exploring different ways of testing their athleticism. So I think that's a key thing. There's the opportunity, I guess, with New Zealand being a bit smaller, to bring adventure racing and OCR and Ninja together. I think just further kind of creates that opportunity for people to shift between those disciplines as well. Perhaps OCR is a really great fit for someone in their 20s and 30s, and as endurance, I guess, is cemented through the age in sport. Adventure racing is an interesting way to explore New Zealand's landscapes. So I think there's certainly situations where some people might land in one part of the obstacle sport discipline set, but end up shifting into others. So yeah.
Yes, you're talking a lot about this idea of obstacle sports, which are something we've got to talk about in this podcast. And the idea of OCR and adventure racing and ninja coming under this umbrella category of obstacle sports, each being a like discipline of a wider obstacle sport. And that's something that the New Zealand Obstacle Sports Association is pushing. I've got to ask you about that in a minute. But before that, yeah, because you do adventure racing as well, right? You have some experience entering some of those sort of races?
I'd say my adventure racing and is reasonably limited. I've done a lot in the past, orienteering and mountain sports, but adventure racing has been something that a lot of friends have been on my case at getting into. Yeah, I've done a lot of if you look at triathlon where you're running and biking, there's a real good interlude to the adventure racing space, and it's much more enjoyable, I think, being out in the trails and forests and mountains. I have done, as part of that, though, a lot of you guess you say road gaining, that there's preparation for that type of sport. But it'll be good to, that's an area that I've got I guess some goals around in the coming years to get a little bit more connected into that adventure racing circuit. Yeah.
I know I've done a few races with you around the place. Your family's very into it. How can you give our listeners some idea of what the kids' events are around New Zealand, or is that something that's growing, or on that? Because I know your two love it, and they're always at events that we're at. Yeah,
that's a good point. There's so I've got two girls. One's 11, one's 9 on Saturday. Actually, she keeps reminding me. There's one thing, I guess, that a friend of mine said some time ago, and it stuck with me, and that's kids, they really develop their love, passion, and understanding not from what you say, but what you do. And so my wife and I quite conscious about not trying to push any sports so much, any sport specifically so much, but to introduce them where possible to these different events. Trail running, Spartan was a great one over in Australia. Both of them were really keen to get involved in the kids race there. And recently, my oldest daughter, who's 11, was involved in the Rogaine mixed adults team that we competed in recently, and so they're kind of at this kind of cusp age where my oldest is able to consider adult level events, but my youngest is probably more interested in the ninja style events, and before lockdown she frequented the parkour gym most weekends here in Auckland, and when she wasn't there would be at the climbing gym. So she's probably sort of sitting on the more agile, and she probably only weighs as much as a dime, but she's quite keen on those kind of dynamic and my wife describes them as high risk movements, whereas my older daughter, she's very keen on the more of the endurance and the longer grinds, and so finding events in that, we've been quite fortunate that OCR is really kid friendly, having specific segments for kids, and both Spartan, Ultimate Athlete have got those kind of divisions there. Some, I guess, more applicable to different age groups than others. Is a great entry point. And if you think about it, I mean, they play on jungle gyms most of their lunchtime, so these are, they're probably better equipped than us adults. Yeah.
What about events coming up next that you're training for or planning to do yourself and your kids? Is there anything on the calendar, or it's a bit hard under COVID at the moment to really plan for something?
It's certainly tricky when the dates on events keep changing, and Auckland Marathon was an event that I did last year. It was on with my youngest daughter, just the 5K. So she was 8 at the time, and that was an event that we were looking towards. But certainly, I've been quite interested in Spartan. They were keen for that. So when we see that back in New Zealand, when we see that back in I think next year now, they've both been keen for that. Training wise, for me, it's really been looking at the Maricopa Munta, which is an adventure race. It's in the King Country. I have some friends that are quite keen to be involved in that. So there's an option there to look to race that. But the main commitment I've got at the moment would be the GOAT, which is the 1,000-meter vertical climb around Mount Ruapehu, which we did earlier in the year, which was a great event. And then Ultimate Athlete next year too, which, for a first time event, they did a pretty slick job getting through what many event organisers would have challenges with teething and those sorts of things. But there's nothing otherwise definitive on the horizon, apart from at least a couple of mountain climbs up Mount Taranaki sometime in the summer, which is an annual thing.
Yeah, well, speaking of Ultimate Athlete,
are you thinking of the Ultimate Athlete this year or not?
Yeah, look, I'll definitely be in for this year in Orewa since it's so close, but also next year as well. I think it was a great trip to Tauranga, to a bit of a breakaway with the family, and throwing in a bit of exercise at the same time was really good. But yeah, Orewa looks good. I think maybe the short course, which I think I'm a bit more suited to, might be a bit of a focus this time round, and just try and, I guess, work on that. The more obstacle dense short course events.
Yeah, good thing about Ultimate Athlete having their first event was, it was awesome for a first event, really large scale and quite well organised. But you were there and we were there with a New Zealand obstacle sports booth in their little festival area, had a tent set up and promoting NZOSA. So did you want to talk about what that is and what the goal of that is and what your involvement is?
Yeah. So the New Zealand Obstacle Sports Association, or the OSA, as we call it, we were gifted a marquee in place at Ultimate Athlete as I guess as part of the collaboration and commitment to trying to build obstacle sports in New Zealand. And we had a great booth there to really just highlight to others that while there's that the event that was happening on the day, there was more events that can fill the calendar, and people could look to work towards in their training or interested in OCR. We had a little competition there, a dead hang competition. Obviously, grip's an important skill in obstacle course racing, and dead hang is a good demonstration of that. So we had a good little turnout with people trying their luck at that, and some sponsors with G-Shock, which really assisted with giving away some prizes there. And I think that's something that all event organisers have indicated to us, that they're quite happy to help and collaborate with by having a stand or I guess you could say a presence at these events, to try and, I guess, galvanise athletes and participants to a collection of events across New Zealand, rather than just a kind of a flash in the pan that can come about when you have one event you're training for, and that event then finishes, and you're kind of asking yourself what next. So it was a great first step for the association to trial a few things out. With some good response to the officiating support that was there. That I know you're heavily involved in, Max, and some really good feedback from people who weren't really aware of obstacle sports, and I guess the fact that it's one of the fastest growing sports. Actually, it's I think was defined recently as the fastest growing sport ever in the world. So to make those connections, and I guess next event, we're hoping for even greater success to kind of build up that database of people that are interested, so we can connect with them and let them know about future events and share with them, I guess, news and insights around both training and solutions for equipment, perhaps, and other resources that can help on that journey. So some big plans in the pipeline, as I'm sure you both understand, and I guess as the time goes by, perhaps we can do a separate discussion as these initiatives are released.
We would both like to get yourself and maybe Liam or Jason or a couple of the other executive members on and go through where you see the OSA in New Zealand and where you see obstacle sports going from their point of view.
Yeah.
Podcast. What other podcasts do you listen to while you're out running around or riding around the city? What inspires you?
It inspires me. That's an interesting one. I listen to all sorts of podcasts, but not. I mean, I listen to a bit of Joe Rogan. I think that's an interesting one to throw in there. I see a bit of interest in science and engineering and technology, and Joe Rogan has a few interesting characters on to listen to from that point of view. They're perhaps a little bit. It's a good way, I guess, of taking a bit of distraction away from the running or cycling at the time, sort of testing the mental thinking while you're torturing yourself out in a training session and that sort of thing. But otherwise, I probably listen to music, different music for different types of training sessions, surprisingly. But that would be probably my main go-to. Yeah.
Well, hopefully you can add this one to your list now, and we can bore you while you're out doing your running and riding.
Yeah, absolutely.
Another question that you may or may not be able to help us with is one of the things that we've discussed a couple of times now with other interviewees is there used to be a lot of small mum and dad type OCR adventure type races around New Zealand that seem to have dried up. So, one, did you compete in any of those, like the Munter and stuff like that? Have you got any insight as to why they may have gone away?
That's an interesting one, and yes, have been involved in, I guess, several different events that were perhaps described as the mum dad shop, although some of them perhaps got a lot bigger in time. But I guess you'd call them the annual event. One interesting one, one of my most fondest memories actually is an event called the Rescue Run. Not sure if either of you have heard of that, but it only happened I think for 2 years. There was a gap in between, but it was a interesting, I guess, adaptation of obstacle sports where you had a team of 6 of you and you needed to carry a stretcher for, I think it was about the distance of about a half marathon in total, and it was through some pretty gnarly terrain, and it was set up with different stations, and parts of that course were managed by some of the emergency services. So there was there's like the helicopter, Auckland Helicopter Rescue team there, civil defence, surf lifesaving, search and rescue, and I think the fire service as well. And it was a great event because it was centred around raising money for all of these emergency services. And I think in total they raised about 300,000 in the last event that I partook there. But I do remember being at the closing ceremony, which they held at Eden Park to kind of thank everyone and have a few drinks and I guess close off the total money and donations raised. And I think the event organizer was Mark Cathro from memory, and he got up and said how demanding and tough it was to actually put on an event like that, and how in essence he was working 16-hour days in the last kind of month to 2 months. And this was a big event, I knew, but small teams, lots of pressure and a lot of demands to try and pull that together, and that it was both very challenging, both personally from a financial pressure, I guess, to make it all happen, and mentally and emotionally, with all the other things that kind of pop up over that time. So I think one of the aspects is that it's people underestimate what it takes to put on an event, and that's where having sponsors and things to contribute financially to help with some of those operating activities is probably really important, and maybe a recipe that Ultimate Athlete were able to work to, and a lot kind of centers on that person's individual or let's say partnership to try and get it across the line. It's and if it's so exhausting, there's only so many times you can kind of really put your hat in the fire to make it happen, and so I do think there is that pressure that makes those sorts of events at risk, which is a shame. But there are some opportunities, I think, there too, and I think that's something that maybe the OSA is able to help with and contribute to over time, if it's right and if it does work for the event organisers, where some of those operating costs, overheads or activities, we might be able to help with consolidating some of those, or coming up with ways of reducing the cost, or getting wider access to volunteers, these sorts of things. So things that are going to support those types of event organisers that perhaps in the past were not there. And really it's about pulling the community together, having athletes kind of understand that supporting these events, these grassroots events, is important for for the sustainability of both the operator and also events nationally. So I think those are probably the key things that to come to mind. Yeah.
No, I have heard you talk about the rescue run before, and you're right. There is it was the potential of it would have been good if it could have carried on.
Yeah, it was a fantastic event. It was well executed, and probably in a high risk kind of environment. But luckily, you have the rescue teams around you, don't you? So so that
all the right people there at the right time.
Yeah.
Yes. Max, what do you got?
I think I've spoken about a lot interesting.
I'll throw out we got a couple of questions we're going to ask everyone as we go through it, Hayden. So,
all right.
So the first one: if you could have a coffee with any person anywhere in the world, who would it be? They can be dead or alive. Who would it be, and what would you talk to them about?
Dead or alive? That's interesting. I think this will be maybe a contentious one. I'm not sure, but would be present. I kind of like the premise of looking forward rather than back, and probably be someone like maybe Elon Musk. Actually, fascinating fascinating character. He's a guy that not only is solving some super hard problems, but is solving, he's solving a bunch of super hard problems, which kind of makes it mega hard. So fascinating person to try and understand what makes that mind tick and gets him up out of bed in the morning. Yeah. There's probably some more that might be better. That's one that's probably one that's a bit techie, right? From a techo nerd like me, but it's someone that's solving some pretty difficult problems is an interesting person to speak to.
No, I agree. He would be very interesting. He's got his foot everywhere, his fingers in every sort of pie. I mean, digging tunnels, sending space satellites up, building electric cars, and then he throws in building a flamethrower. It's just like, where does all that come from?
Yeah, it's fascinating.
Yeah. The 12-year-old Hayden at school, what sort of occupation were you looking at, and did you get there or did you change?
12-year-old. Very interesting. 12-year-old, I would say hadn't made my mind up. I'd say, however, in a few years past that, I was starting to think of becoming some sort of sports person. And that was in that kind of triathlon kind of phase. And then after getting injured and realizing that that can be quite a fickle space to be, I had to quickly rush to go to find out what to do next and move. I got enough, I guess you could say, enough pass marks to get me into university to then work out what I wanted to do next. And so it was a turning point that was for the best, I think, because I wouldn't be where I am at the moment without those sorts of challenging times that happened at that point in my youth. Obviously not so great at the time, but that's there's always a benefit that can come from these things.
Okay, and this is one I meant to ask you earlier, and I've just realised I missed it. In this current time and environment we're at, what's motivating you to keep training, to getting out there in the rain and cold when you know that you're locked at home and most of the events that you're planning training for have been getting cancelled or probably will get cancelled in this bit of uncertainty? So how you keep yourself motivated to getting out there and doing it? Or has it slackened off? Are you not doing as much as you would have been at this time last year you were in the same boat. So this time the year before?
Oh, look, I would say they're definitely doing much less, but it's not necessarily through a lack of motivation. I think the challenge has been the working landscape and certainly the busyness that I have as a working role just changed quite dramatically over this period of time. So it's been balancing, like a lot of people out there, balancing all the disruption in terms of getting the time to train. But from a motivation point of view, your races, I think, are a great way of kind of pinning your efforts against. And I have in the past liked to have, had something to work against, but that's not necessarily to be motivated, but more to be focused in that training. I don't find it terribly difficult to get up early in the morning and go do some sort of exercise of some description, but often previously it's probably been very short-term focused or short view focused, which was, well, what is the thing that I probably haven't done very much of recently and how can I improve that? So recently it's been, well, I haven't been riding many hills recently on my bike, so I'll go out and smash a few hills and get that vertical counter up. Doesn't necessarily lead you to good competitive condition by any means, but having an event kind of allows you to be a bit more focused and say, well, actually I can work towards something that has a bit more of a long-term benefit. But I guess the other thing too is the kids are a good motivator. The exercise has a great effect on the mind. So every time I see the kids are in a bad space, they often need to start doing some burpees, or go for a run, or challenge you on the jungle gym. So yeah, it's.
I believe you have got quite a good obstacle course built down the side of the house.
Yeah, it's work in progress. We get the kids kind of assisting with how that takes shape, and yeah, so far it's been quite good. A climbing area on the wall, and jungle gyms, of course, and things like that. So yeah.
Yeah, is there anything that you want to talk about? Like any question that you wish we would have asked you about?
No, I don't. Well, in terms of me directly, I don't think so. I think there's, as I mentioned before, this is a great opportunity to bring New Zealand together with in that obstacle sports community. So just really, quite privileged to be involved, and thanks for the invitation. It'll be great, I think, in the future, as you commented before, that as there's new initiatives that the Obstacle Sports Association is looking to release, that an opportunity to perhaps discuss that and be challenged on how it might work in the community, get that feedback and discussion going. That'll be really great. But look forward to, I guess, listening to the debate on how things are unfolding in the New Zealand, I guess, obstacle sports arena.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on the podcast to talk about future projects, and I think now's a good time to build the community, like you were saying earlier. Actually, there's little pockets of communities, I think, around New Zealand of, the different OCR crowds and adventure racing crowds, and I think a lot of them aren't so aware that it is especially in OCR, a lot of people aren't so aware that it is a wider activity. Like a local event will get, hundreds of participants, but then there's not too much carryover between them traveling to other events. So hopefully now, during COVID time, when all the events are getting screwed and postponed, and hopefully now's a good time to be doing something like a podcast and something like the OSA, and trying to get these community initiatives happening while the events aren't necessarily in place for people to have that outlet.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely agree with that.
All right, we'll put your online stuff where people can contact you in our notes, but do you just want to tell everyone where they can contact you, or if they can contact you, or
sure,
do you want people to contact you?
Well, no, I think definitely hit me up on Strava. Always interested as to exploring new places, new routes, and things like that. So yeah, just look up Hayden Wells on Strava, and Instagram. My handle there is Timberwolf111. So that's probably two avenues. Yeah, but
all right.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, well, awesome, Hayden. Thank you for coming on, and yeah, look forward to catching up with you again on podcasts in the future.
Thanks a lot, Hayden.
Great, no worries. Thanks, guys. Keep it up.